Hi guys, welcome back to the shop and hello to any new viewers. In addition, thank you to anybody who comments or contributes to the conversation. It's always great to get that feedback and it's great to see people sort of throw in their tuppence halfpenny worth, so to speak. When you publish YouTube videos, you sort of put it out there, you're operating in a bit of a vacuum, so the comments and the feedback that you get there is very valuable. Now, one thing I'd ask is that if you are watching from somewhere outside of Ireland, where I'm based, you might take a moment and just stick in a comment, hi from wherever you are. It's one thing that amazes me about YouTube is that global reach. And when I look at my statistics, there's a lot of viewers in the US, Canada, UK, Philippines, India, etc., etc. So anyway, if you get a chance, stick in a hi from wherever you are, just to see where people are watching from. Anyway, today's video is about workshop organisation, and I'm going to do this in sort of 10 areas or a list of 10 items. They might give you an idea of how to organise your own workshop or, trigger something, etc., etc. What I found is that the more organised your workshop is, the more likely and the easier it is to get a job done, especially if it's a smaller job where it's just sort of 2 minutes work. If, for example, if you have to roll out 50 foot of cable or an extension reel, find a tool, plug it in, etc., etc., you're way less likely to do that job than if you can just grab a cordless tool. So the same principle applies to fasteners, materials, all the bits and pieces you need. I'm the only one who uses my workshop, and there is an advantage there in that if I put something down into a place, it stays there until the next time I go looking for it. What I found though is that being able to put my hand on stuff or having something to hand and knowing where it is saves a heap of time as regards searching through boxes for parts, fasteners, you name it, etc., etc. And in addition to that, I just like an organised work area. Call me sort of OCD-ish or whatever. Yeah, away we go. Now, first place I'd start as regards organising is start out some bit of shelving, no matter what type it is. This shelf started out life inside the porta cabin, and then it got moved in here into my workshop when I sold the porta cabin. Over time, and I've been lucky enough that I know people who drink wine. What I've done is grab the wine boxes, label them, and stuck them up on shelves. And we'll say, for example, screws. We have electric 1, 2, and 3 here for different connectors, sockets, plugs, etc., etc. Hammers, chisels, files. So you can see there that you're able to put your hand on whatever you need straight away. Now, you don't need to start out with wooden boxes, and keep your eye out for them, obviously, but a good strong cardboard box would do you fine. And just get them up on shelves, label them. You can start off with just write on the box itself with a marker or whatever, and that will sort of get you started as regards organising things. Now, this is a bit more fancy. I got this, call it a large pigeonhole shelf from a friend of mine. He was sort of half thrown away, whatever. As it turned out, it fits the 6 bottle wine boxes particularly well. Again, labelled. Just stick whatever you need into them. Get it organised, get it off the floor, so you don't have to be rooting through boxes. I think when you're organising a workshop, you need to be a bit of a magpie or sort of gather up bits of junk and so on and so forth. You can repurpose them into whatever you need to do. Now, just on the subject of shelves, you can sort of make them purpose built for what you need. All this is just a block of 2x4 screwed into the wall with a little shelf there. Now, what you can always do as well is make up a shelf for a specific purpose. In this particular instance, this is a shelf sitting over my air compressor. It has all air fittings, air tools, hoses, impact sockets, etc., etc. One thing I would recommend though, that if you are putting together a shelf, reinforce the shelf with a bit of steel. This one has a bow in it from the weight in the middle. Also at this end here, what we have is just a notch cut out of it there, just to take the end of the compressor hose or the coil compressor hose. Now we're on to the next shelf, and this again is sort of reiterating the point that having a shelf for a specific use or a specific area, very sort of advantageous. This is obviously the wall shelf. I got this idea from a guy called Glass Impressions on YouTube. I'll stick a link in the comments down below. And what it is, it's just basically heavy wall pipe, sections of it cut out, cut to fit each individual tool then, and then screwed into a sheet of plywood here That's sort of 3/4 inch ply. And on this one now you can see this is braced with a piece of steel, just angle iron, front and back to stop the weight sagging it down. Now what we're looking at here, or the next section that we look at, is benches. These are two benches. I got a big one and a small one, sorry, a tall one and a low one from a workshop clearance. I'd hate to have to go and buy these now. Just the price of steel alone would be phenomenal. But anyway, as it turns out, the lower one very handy for sort of dirty jobs, like anything oily, greasy, or hydraulic related gets done on that bench. Has the vise on it. This one then has turned out to be sort of a cleaner work area for welding and just tidier fabrication where you're not looking for grease to be inside the welds. The end of this bench here is welding rods made up of frame for the rod canisters. So say chipping hammer, little bolt cutters, magnets, fluff, magnets, hammers, gloves, all that type of spare stuff there. And this has become sort of a stick welding and a gas cutting and heating section, so to speak. The welder itself is mounted on an arm, and it can swing then, so you can operate it over the bench or further down the workshop then. And all I did there was sort of weld up bits of steel bars, bits of brackets, and make up this. There's a little sort of plate on top here to hold the welder, and it's also sort of covered with tape just to stop it marking the paint. Now the other end of the bench then has become sort of clamp central, so to speak. Fairly straightforward. Some of the clamps are straight onto the bench. Here I just cut and welded a piece of angle iron into the legs of the bench, and then that sort of provides a clamping area for clamping all the clamps. Again, handy. You know exactly where they are. You know exactly where to put them back, and they're easy to handle. Now on the other side of the bench then, I had a few sheets of old plywood hanging around. So I bought these boxes. They're Stanley Fat Max sort of part storage boxes. Measured them and then made sort of 16 different pigeonholes, so to speak. And effectively what these are then is for fastener storage. On each box I've written what type of bolt it is and the thread form or the thread pitch. Took a photograph of all of those then, so that if I'm shopping for bolts, I know exactly what thread pitch I need to replenish stock or whatever like that. On the end of the other bench, I have two items going on here. Number one is just a bracket for grinders. All it is a bit of flat plate welded onto the bench so you can hang the grinders. Second thing then going on here is a hammer holder. Effectively what this is, just a bit of angle iron, and it has little lengths about maybe 3/8 of an inch or about 10 mil of just bits of pipe cut, welded on, so that the hammers then slot into them like that. So just very straightforward, but again one of those things where at least you know where the hammers live then. Now at the other end of the bench then is just and again another shelf made up for holding bits, reinforced with a bit of angle iron just to give it a bit of strength, stop it sagging in the middle. And then I made up just piece of flat plate steel with 3 bits of bar welded into it, and then poked it into a piece of plywood and attached the plywood to the wall just to take the grinding discs then, so that they live in a particular spot and you can see whether you have grinding discs or not, or whether you need to replace them. Now over the last few years I made a very strong concerted effort to put every piece of equipment in the workshop on wheels as far as possible. You don't have to pay big money to put stuff on wheels. For example, the air compressor there, the wheels from that came off an old shopping cart that was heading for a skip. My whiteboard stand here, the wheels for that came from a little furniture dolly that I think cost €10, which these days is about $10, in a sort of a German discount supermarket, and it was the cheapest way of actually buying wheels. Little bench then that was made up again on wheels. Everything is on wheels as far as possible to try and keep floor space clear. So my recommendations would be that if you see wheels on any piece of equipment going into a skip or going into scrap, take the wheels off it, or the axles or little plates or whatever bits of wheels are there. They're very valuable for mounting your equipment then. So if I need to clear this area, all I need to do is just unplug the compressor and just wheel everything out of the way, and a much bigger working envelope then. Now again, we're still on the topic of wheeled equipment. This one I made specifically so that it was of a height that went under one of the wooden benches to keep it out of the way. Made a bit of a mistake because I never calculated in the height of the bracket to take the wheels. So it just about fits in there now, but you know, there's a bit of poking to do. Any frame I've made up for a welder or any piece of equipment, I've included cable storage as being key. I'd always try and then as well to make a sort of a shelf for a box for the sort of the ancillary equipment that goes with it. So this is fairly straightforward, just basically frame, plasma cutter sitting in the middle of it, power cord storage at the back, the airline goes on there, but that's stored on the compressor. So it's sort of a purpose-made trolley specifically for the plasma cutter. What I've tried to do as well is, if I was making a trolley for a plasma cutter or welder, have it in such a way that the fittings are made out of wood, so you can replace that easy enough without having to cut anything. So if I buy a slightly bigger plasma cutter at any point in the future, or smaller, I can just clamp it in with a piece of wood. And if you look at the side here, what we have is a plywood shelf, and then there's just 4 little squares to stop it sliding around the place, and a little runner at the front and back again just to stop. Now, a big time saver for me is having everything labelled and identified. What I found to be particularly handy, and it's a very low cost solution, is a roll of masking tape and a marker. Or if you want to get a bit fancier, you can go for a Dymo label maker. They're fairly cheap to run. Now, another thing which is particularly handy is if you get yourself some of these small bags. They're just sort of clear polythene bags. I'd imagine they'd be fairly cheap. I don't even know where these came from. And a marker, and what you can do then is, when you come across unusual parts or stuff like that, stick them into the bag and just write in the bag what they're for. In this particular instance now, we've hard hat clips for headlamp. So they're obviously clips to go in a construction helmet to take some type of headlamp. So the chance of me recognizing what they are in a few years time or whatever is fairly minimal. So again, identification and labeling is sort of a huge advantage to have. Now, last on our list is sort of hooks and hanging. I found it to be of great advantage to be able to hang chains, leads, helmets, anything and everything from hooks, to get them off the floor and up on a wall. These are hooks. I got a box of these at one point, don't know where they came from, but they'd be very easy to make. Take a piece of rebar or something like that, bend it, maybe you might have to apply a little bit of heat or use lighter rebar, and then tough enough to get the discs, but it would be fairly easy to get a bit of flat bar and just cut it into lengths, drill a hole each side then, and then you'd be able to fasten that to a wall. I find them particularly advantageous as regards getting everything off the floor as far as possible. Now, they're my 10 tips or 10 areas where they might be of use to you, or trigger an idea that you might get some use out of as regards just tidying up your workspace, or getting a bit of floor space free or whatever. So, any questions, stick them in the comments down below, and we'll see you in the next video.